Finally, man. It feels like it's been a long time since the Bruins have had what we call prospects. And they finally do. Like, this is the most excitement around development camp that there's been in a long time, right? If that's not an oxymoron to be excited around development camp. They move somewhere between the 25 and 30 range for prospect pools in the NHL, but consistently they have been the last place team over the last few seasons. No longer the case. In fact, Colorado, who is right there with the Bruins for all these years, traded one of their best prospects to Boston. We'll talk about him in a second. I'm tiering this list. So what I'm doing is looking at the prospects that we're most excited about, but looking at how close they are to the NHL. So we'll start with the guys who could be making an impact in this year, then the guys who will be doing it in the next probably 2 years, and then probably 3 to maybe even 4 years away kind of guys. Last qualifier, Matthew Poitras is not on this list. I'm not considering him a prospect anymore, same way I'm not doing it for Mason Lohrei. Poitras played 66 NHL games. I certainly hope that he'll be a part of this team next year and might have a little bit of time in Providence because that's what the Bruins do. I don't think many other teams would do it. So I'm not counting him. Without any further ado, let's look at the guys who are going to be helping out the Bruins next season. First prospect on this list, Fraser Minten, the guy they got from Toronto in the Brandon Carlo deal at the trade deadline. He was one of really only 2 worthwhile prospects that Toronto had. And that's why a lot of Leafs fans were pretty pissed that they parted with him. It was really just him and Easton Cowan. He did play some time for the Bruins at the end of the season, played 25 games in his career, 5 points, a -5, played the last 6 games with the Bruins this year where he did score a goal, 46% face-off rate in his career in the NHL, which is not good for a center, but you're probably projecting him to be kind of a bottom 6 guy, not only this year, but maybe for the rest of his career. And I think he can bring a good 2-way game to you. Like Fraser Minten's not going to be a guy that's scoring 65, 70 points. When he was drafted, he was compared to William Karlsson, which I think would be a really nice comp. I mean, William Karlsson's a career like 50-point guy, somewhere between 40 and 50 points a year. They actually had similar starts to their career. They were both traded like within their first season in the NHL, basically. And it took Karlsson a couple of years. He didn't really get it going until about age 25, and that's when he really broke out. And Fraser Minten still sitting here at age 21. It could be a couple of years before he truly breaks out. But honestly, if he even becomes Charlie Coyle, I think that's a benefit for the Bruins. Like, that's someone who should, like, Charlie Coyle should be a mainstay on a good team's bottom 6, third line center, can hopefully give you 40 points, give you a good defensive game. If Fraser Minten can give you that, I think you'd be really happy. And the biggest thing where I think he helps you is just the roster makeup, the way you build your team. Because if Fraser Minten can be a Charlie Coyle, dare I say a William Karlsson type, like that's a good high end. Like if he can be that and be a full 200-foot, mainly defensive kind of center that plays in your middle to bottom 6, that means you can stop making everybody else into, or try. That means you can stop trying to make all your other centers into Patrice Bergeron. Okay, because I think that is something that sucks about the Bruins with their young, skilled players, is they try to make them into Patrice Bergeron, and Bergeron is one of one. You try to make them into Bergeron, and they end up becoming Charlie Coyle, and you're stunting their offensive growth. Fraser Minten, no offense, doesn't have a huge offensive upside for his entire career. So if he can be kind of a shutdown, but 2-way kind of center, that way you can not have James Hagens be that. You could just have James Hagens be Jack Hughes, and Fraser Minten can be Charlie Coyle, and you'll kind of figure out the rest from there. You don't need to try to make James Hagens into something he's not, because you have Fraser Minten down there. 10 points in 11 games at the end of the season for Providence, too. Played on both special teams units. I think he is going to be a good penalty-killing center for years to come. And if he can be that starting this year, that is a huge lift for the Bruins all the way down the line. The other guy that I think will make an impact this year that we've seen a little bit of before, but we're still waiting for something more, is Fabian Lysell. Came up, scored his first NHL goal finally towards the end of last season. And to be fair to Fabian, it was the first time he really got a run of NHL games. I think that's something that we've been complaining about as Bruins fans for years. It's just like, give this kid a shot, and really the last year and a half or so, right? Give this kid a shot. Obviously, there was something that was keeping him down in Providence, but with the way the Bruins went last year, it really shouldn't have taken as long as it did to give him a string of games in the NHL. He only played the last 12 games of the season for the Bruins, and it was a lot of the last year and a half, one game up, back down, and that just wasn't good for the team, and it wasn't good for Fabian Lysell either. Obviously, former first-round pick back in 2021, wasn't actually seen as a reach at that point, which is kind of interesting. This is a pick that kind of bucks the trend of what the Bruins were doing in the early rounds of the NHL draft. They didn't draft him because he was big and physical and could have a lot of defensive upside. They drafted him because he was known for his speed, his stick handling ability, and had a ton of offensive upside. And it just hasn't really worked out so far. He's still 22 years old, okay? There's still some time for Fabian Lysell, but it's kind of now or never this season. Like, he should get a run in where he's playing the whole season for the Bruins. He was seen at the time that he was drafted as a Jake DeBrusk replacement, and he couldn't crack the NHL roster in time for Jake DeBrusk to walk 3 years later. So there's been a ton of criticism around Lysell, mainly because 2 picks behind him, the Dallas Stars picked Wyatt Johnston, and the next round, the Dallas Stars picked Logan Stankoven. So it really doesn't look good for the Bruins and the way that they've been drafting. I did have 3 points to end the season in those 12 games for the big club, and then went back down to Providence, which I thought was actually a good move. Like, for someone who was critical of how much he had played in Providence, getting those 12 games at the end of the season in the NHL and then going down to the AHL for the postseason, I think was a good thing. But he only had 2 assists, -1 in 7 AHL playoff games, and he only had 3 points in 12 games at the end of the NHL season. But I'm reminded of a good point. Someone brought it up on Twitter about Fabian Lysell, is that Brad Marchand played his first 20 games in the NHL at the end of the 2010 season. And that was a Bruins team that was pretty solid. They were fighting for a playoff spot, which they obviously did get, and won the first round against Buffalo. That was a much better Bruins team than the one that Fabian Lysell played on this year. And Brad Marchand only had 1 point in those 20 games, 1 assist. And I think it was in his first game. And then nothing after that until the next season. And he became a Hall of Famer. Not saying Fabian Lysell is going to be a Hall of Famer, but just saying, let's see some more games for this kid at the NHL level. Lysell could absolutely be a top 6 winger for a team that, let's be frank, is going to be pretty bad, and it could bring some offensive upside. And maybe he does become a legit top 6 winger in the future. Fabian Lysell, Fraser Minten, those are the guys that you're going to see on the team next year, making an impact next year, 2025, 2026. Let's go down to that next tier of kind of the next wave, who you're going to see in probably 2 years. You can maybe see one of these guys playing in Providence this season and kind of track his progress. Let's start with what could be a diamond in the rough for the Bruins all of a sudden. Don's Locmelis out of Latvia, UMass. He was a 4th-round pick in 2022. He's still only 21 years old, played a couple of seasons at the Zoo, and didn't have eye-popping numbers, okay? 15 goals, 47 points, 70 games out there at UMass. He wasn't exactly lighting it up, but he signed his entry-level contract. He went to Providence this year, and at the end of the regular season for the P Bruins, he kind of shocked everybody, okay? Amazingly, he goes down to Providence at the end of the regular season. He plays 6 regular season games and scores 12 points, 3 goals and 9 assists. They stuck him on the wing. He was playing next to Matt Poitras, and they had incredible chemistry, and it kind of took everybody by surprise. And they did it because they didn't want to put a bunch of the pressure on him to be playing center right away and kind of all the responsibilities that comes with being a center for the Bruins in the Bruins system. So they stuck him on the wing, and his hockey IQ really shined, and that's why he just had this sudden burst of scoring, playing alongside an NHL guy, basically, in Matthew Poitras. He's he's 6 foot. He's only 180 pounds. You see him, and he looks bigger than that. Maybe it's because he was playing in the AHL, but he looks bigger than that. He plays bigger than that. And you certainly have to play pretty physical to play in Hockey East. I mean, you're playing with guys who are 24 years old. Like that's just a prerequisite. Did have a really nice World Junior Championships as well for a surprise Latvia team. 6 points in 7 games, and really got a reputation at that tournament for being like a shutdown center. And played at the World Championships last year for Latvia. Sidney Crosby found him after a game and complimented him on his play. So there is maybe some big time kind of prospectus there from the great Sidney Crosby. But I see him as being, again, kind of like Fraser Minton, a shutdown, penalty kill, defensive first center who can definitely still bring some offensive upside. I expect him to play probably the whole season at Providence, really learn how to play center, and maybe you'll see him up in Boston in the 2026-27 season, or, things could go wrong and you might see him before then. But I think he is someone who really kind of jumped leaps and bounds his last year at UMass and certainly made a great first impression in his first couple of weeks in Providence. Don's Locmelis. Remember the name. Next guy we're looking at is a guy you're pretty familiar with, let's be honest. That next guy is James Hagens. So obviously we kind of know the deal with James Hagens. 7th overall pick just last month. Really fell into the Bruins' lap. I still see it as a slam dunk kind of pick. I know some people have pushed back on it just a little bit, but to me, James Hagens, huge upside, absolutely the pick at number 7. People complaining that he only was a point a game player as a 17/18-year-old in Hockey East are stupid. I'm sorry. That's just a stupid take. Like, he's playing against 24, 25-year-olds, and he was playing alongside 2 NHLers that he was deferring to, and he was only a point a game for one of the very best college hockey programs in the country. I'm sorry. I can't take that as like a downside for James Hagens. I fully expect him to go back to BC this year, although he hasn't announced it yet. It would obviously make the most sense. He goes back to BC, becomes a 60, 65 point guy, maybe a Hobey Baker finalist, and becomes the guy at the Heights. You could see James Hagens at the end of the 2025-26 season. After the BC season is over, the Bruins have a couple more games just to ride out the regular season. I think you could absolutely see James Hagens up on that level at that point, but probably a guy whose best hockey or best first impression for the Bruins is coming not this next season, but the season after. Now let's look at the guys who are truly a few years away. Okay. You're not going to see him at the end of this season. You're not even going to see him in Providence this season. They are truly a few years away from making anything happen. And the first guy on this part of the tier is one of my favorite prospects for the Bruins, and that is Will Zellers. The guy who played the USHL this past year as a 19-year-old and lit it up. USHL Player of the Year. He came to Boston from the Charlie Coyle trade, which sent Coyle to Colorado, Zellers and Casey Middlestat and a draft pick to the Bruins. He was one of the only real prospects in Colorado's system, obviously at a very young age. And then they traded him to Boston for a rental that they've already let Charlie Coyle go and sent him out to Columbus. Will Zellers, to me, is one of the most fascinating prospects and mouthwatering prospects in this Bruins system. He's a long way away. Okay, again, played in the USHL as a 19-year-old. He's going to North Dakota this year, one of the best college hockey programs in the country. Decommitted from truly one of the best in Boston University, so he might be a few more years away than he would have been. But this kid is a pure goal scorer. No ifs, ands, or buts. This kid wakes up in the morning, he laces up his skates, and he scores goals. That's all he does. He won the USHL Player of the Year for the Green Bay Gamblers, and he led the league in goals with 44 points per game in 1.37 and led the league in shots. He did it on a 21% shooting percentage. He also went and pitched in 27 assists to go along with his 44 goals. 71 points in 52 games. The kid just pounds a puck, man. He's just a goal scorer. You can't teach it. And he was part of the best power play in the USHL, which is 27%. Still has a lot to learn, obviously. And we'll learn that with a couple of years in Grand Forks playing for the Fighting Sioux. Oh, shit. Can't say that anymore. Can't say it. The Fighting Hawks of North Dakota. He will learn a lot about the full 200-foot game. It's no Hockey East, but they play some pretty good hockey out there in the CCHA. He will learn a lot in college. I see him as kind of to use a Bruin, a former Bruin as an example. I see him as kind of a Michael Ryder type. I don't think he's ever going to become like this elite playmaker. I don't think he's going to be an elite 200-foot guy, but he's got an instinct for scoring goals, and you really can't teach that. So that's someone I'm really excited about seeing, going through the ranks, college hockey into the AHL. With his scoring touch, it could be a lot of fun, but you just might not see it in Boston for, I would say 3 or 4 years, maybe even 22 years old. I think that's probably a good benchmark for him to hit to be a realistic prospect for this team at age 22. Next guy we're looking at, I also did a segment on him just a few days ago. So check that out on the channel if you haven't seen it already. Because of that, I'll keep it quick, but it's Vashek Blanar. The no-name prospect, the guy who they draft in the 4th round, taking a flyer, and they don't even have a graphic for him. And everybody's looking for his elite prospect page. They can't find it because they're looking for Vashek Blanar when he was actually Vashek Richards for a long time. Grew up in Colorado, has Swiss ancestry, I want to say, and is playing in Sweden. Vashek Blanar, offensive defenseman, certainly with a bit of potential on both ends, looks a lot like Mason Lohrei. And I know to a lot of Bruins fans who are impatient, that's a bad comp. They don't want to hear that. I love Mason Lohrei, and I think he is going to take some serious steps forward in this season. He just needs some time, man. He just needs a lot of time at the NHL level. And unfortunately for the Bruins, you couldn't hide Mason Lohrei because of how bad you were. So Vashek Blanar takes all the good things in Mason Lohrei. Big, tall, exceptional skater at 6'4", great on his edges. Everybody was gushing about him in development camp, in the drills. Adam McQuaid was really speaking very highly of him, and McQuaid was kind of running the camp. So Vashek Blanar could be that next diamond in the rough as a 4th-round pick, but I think he's going to go back and play in Sweden this year. It's going to be a couple of years before you see him. Last guy that we're going to talk about today, not so much a diamond in the rough, but we're worried that he might become a 1st-round draft bust after just 1 year. Of course, that next guy, who's a couple years away, is Dean Letourneau, currently playing at Boston College. We all know kind of how this went. 1st-round pick last year, 25th overall, kind of coming in the Linus Ullmark deal. There are already people that think Dean Letourneau is a bust after 1 season of college hockey. And I'll admit, it really wasn't good. I don't think he's a bust yet, but it was not a great first impression. He went straight from prep hockey to Hockey East at Boston College. And he has already admitted, the Bruins have already admitted, that probably wasn't the best move. In fact, I think a lot of us at the time were saying that's kind of a crazy move. That doesn't happen. And it showed. He only had 2 points in his year at BC. They were 2 assists. He was a healthy scratch quite a bit. 6'7" is, I think, the reason why the Bruins were so intent on drafting him in the 1st round. A center, big, tough. Like, it's just classic. All the things that the Fabian Lysell pick was, this one wasn't. It's all the things that Cam Neely and Don Sweeney absolutely love. And I think because of that, a lot of Bruins fans rush to say he's a bust, because when Neely and Sweeney get guys like this, whether it be through free agency or the draft, they tend to be busts. Okay? But Dean Letourneau isn't that yet. I think he's going to get more of a solid role and is going to understand the college hockey game a lot better, and what is really close to a pro game, let's be honest, with the NCAA and Hockey East. He's still getting used to that. I think he's still a good couple of years away, 3, maybe 4 years away, but I'm not ready to list Dean Letourneau as a complete bust just yet. It was just a tough look that the Bruins were so bad this year, and their first round pick was doing nothing at BC. It was just a tough look. I think it was just a tough one for Bruins fans to watch this whole season. So let me know who you're most excited about in this Bruins prospect pool. Let me know down in the comment section below. Who do you think is going to make an impact right away? Get involved in that comment section. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're finally excited about kind of the long-term future of the Bruins. You can catch us live on YouTube every weekday, high noon Eastern time, and then wherever you get your podcasts as well. Check out the other videos on the channel talking Bruins, prospects, the outlook on this year, and everything else going on in Boston sports. I'm your host, Cam Stuart. Zach Burke keeps us on the air 5 days a week.